I'm Rae Benjamin, and this is the In the Cut podcast, where we dissect the best episodes of television with professional writers. This week, we're going to see why the pilot episode of Abbott Elementary gets an A+.
We in the cut.
Abbott Elementary is an Emmy-winning comedy set in a Philadelphia public school. The mockumentary follows a group of hardworking teachers and a less hardworking principal as they try to make an impact. In the pilot, enthusiastic young teacher Janine requests a new rug for her classroom. The older teachers warn her that it's impossible to get anything new around here. At Abbott, the budget's low, resources are low, everything is low except Janine's energy. She should just get over it, but our girl never takes no for an answer. In her quest, she meets a bunch of obstacles and a potential new bae, but can't get a rug from the school district. In the end, her colleagues come through and get the rug. She learns that teachers in Philly gotta work outside the system and hustle to get things done, but it's all worth it for the kids. And here to help us ace this test on Abbott Elementary is the magnanimous Jonterri Gadson.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
That's very cool.
She's an author, a former professor, and TV writer who's worked on a variety of shows like the Emmy-winning A Black Lady Sketch Show, Netflix hit The Upshaws, Kelly Clarkson Show, and so many more. So I'm really glad to have you here with us.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so you chose to discuss Abbott, which I was really happy about. It's also one of my favorite shows. I wanted to ask you, why do you think Abbott just became an instant classic? I think it's a rare show that really resonates not only with critics, it's winning Emmys, it's winning all these awards, but fans really like it. It's mainstream popular. It has huge numbers. And we don't really see that sort of popularity with traditional sitcoms today. So why do you think that it's resonated so well?
Yeah, I think when Abbott premiered, it came and it filled a hole that was left after Parks and Rec and The Office. And I know from reading interviews with like Quinta Brunson, like that was those shows like Parks and Rec and The Office, like these, I'm forgetting the word.
Mockumentaries.
Yes, mockumentaries, right? Were an inspiration for the show. And also I feel like the fact that it's a school, right? Like that's something that everybody can relate to, like across the nation, right? Like that's something that we all exposed to. It's like the funding issues that a school had. All of these things are real issues that are relatable to people. And so I think that it's something that everybody can connect with. So they do a good job of mixing like humor with heart, with like, real social justice issues. Yeah, and it just hits.
Yeah, and I think it's also just very joyful. I think that we're really missing that. I think a lot of things are labeled as comedies, or they're not really comedies. Or Abbott, you're actually laughing. And even though, like you said, they're tackling these social issues and stuff, that's not really the forefront. That's not what it's about. And I think it's subversive in that way, in that it can get these progressive things out there without sort of feeling preachy about it, or like, I don't want to listen to this person give their sermon.
Yes,
you
exactly.
can laugh and then sort of sneak in some
that's
lessons.
My favorite type. Favorite way to do things.
Exactly. Not so obvious. Mine too as well. So let's get into the structure of the show. So we start with a cold open. In a comedy show, you typically have a cold open, 3 acts, and you end with a tag. So in the Abbott cold open, we have Janine, and we meet her. She's this very plucky, very sort of optimistic, overly so teacher that's working in this underfunded public school, Abbott Elementary, and the student pees on her classroom rug at the end. So how do you think the cold open really serves to establish the tone and the setting of Abbott?
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a great question, because I definitely think we know right away who our main character is. We know who we're rooting for. Like, she's introducing us to the world of the show. We're seeing it through her and her optimism, how much she cares about the kids. But we also see that she doesn't necessarily have a complete hold on things, right? It's not even, she's a little delusional about, you know, her own, like, about how well things are going.
Yes.
Which is why I love that, you know, once she thinks everything's under control, then there's a kid peeing on the rug. Like, it's like, okay, like that's kind of like what the show is, right? Like, they can never quite get a hold of everything that's going on.
Just when they think they've won, you know, some other issue happens.
Yeah.
And like you said, it really establishes Janine as a character as this sort of overly determined, perhaps delusional teacher that thinks she can single-handedly change everything, but there are structural issues that go way beyond her, and it doesn't really matter how much she tries. She's not going to be able to change things, which sounds sort of depressing, but it's not. It's a really hopeful show in the way I feel like this could be like a gritty drama.
Oh yeah, you could absolutely, it could be like The Wire when they did like that season with the kids. Like, it could be that in the school.
Yes, but they choose not to make it uplifting, which I think is hilarious. So then we move into Act 1 of the comedy structure, which is really where the protagonist establishes their goal. For the case of Janine, she establishes the goal of using the funds, requesting the funds from the school district to buy a new rug that her student has just peed on. But more than just, you know, pushing the plot forward, we really get into the characters in Act 1. And even though Janine is the main character, it is really a multi-protagonist show where we follow, you know, the lives of many characters. So how does Abbott do a job of establishing these characters so quickly through their dialogue?
Yeah, I think it's like in comedy, we talk about like people having like character games. Like the characters all have a certain game they're going to play. So for instance, when you meet Jacob, Jacob's always talking about Black issues or, you know, like, and he continues to do that even as he helps to move the plot forward. I think what's most important in the introduction of Barbara is that when you make a pilot, you need to have opposing viewpoints. And Barbara is the opposing viewpoint of Janine. She's this old school, she seems jaded, right? Like, you know, just gotta keep it pushing, nothing's gonna change, as opposed to Janine, who's like, I can make a change. That's what I'm here to do. And that's the opposing viewpoint that you need to see so that there's conflict built off of that. Like, they both care. They just have different ways of going about things. So I thought that was a genius introduction of Barbara. And also to show how Janine looks up to Barbara, has mommy issues with Barbara to the point of being like they really, like, oh, if you were just thinking like, oh, maybe she has mommy issues. And then she's like, bye, mom. Like, she actually slips up and calls her that.
Yes.
And then you get Melissa Chimenti, who's like the gangster.
Yes.
And so everybody has their role, and it's a role they're still playing 4 seasons in freshly. Like,
Yes, exactly. And I think Abbott does such a wonderful job of just doing it so quickly. Like, you know, in one line who these people are. You don't need a whole scene. You don't need a lot of words. I feel like a lot of times when I read pilots of newer writers, they just take so long to get to the point. It's like, I don't know what this scene is. What are you talking about? And you don't need a whole page to explain someone's background. When you mentioned Melissa, you know, being like the shady character, when she's first introduced, she's like, what do you need to know about me?
Exactly.
Acting very like a shady,
you see it.
Yes. And so you know that, like you said, Jacob, I think he says something about MSNBC or quoting Rachel Maddow.
He's very excited. Yes.
So it's like, you know, the type of person that would quote that, like, you know who this person is. So it's like, when we're writing, think of ways how we can illustrate and show a character without having to explain to the audience. Like, especially in a mockumentary, I think you could rely on that too much of having just exposition, like someone popping up saying, you know, Janine is blah, blah, blah. You don't need to say that.
Exactly, because we see it.
Exactly.
And I also think it's like when the characters are so well defined, that makes comedy easier because they're telling jokes in their character. Like, the jokes come out of their character. So
and the characters are so well defined in Abbott. It reminds me of The Office a lot in that way, is where the comedy comes from these opposing dynamics, like you were saying, sort of the older teachers versus the newer teachers, these sort of opposing viewpoints, because everyone has such a specific point of view.
Yes.
Like sometimes when you're reading comedies, when I read comedies from writers that aren't quite nailing it, it could be funny, but it's sort of like the voices aren't there. All these characters sound the same. Everyone's telling the same sort of humor, the same sort of jokes. But in Abbott, the characters are so well defined. Like you couldn't take a line from Jacob and just give it to Melissa.
No,
because
absolutely.
they're completely different characters. And so I think that's what Abbott nails so well, and what this pilot nails so well, is establishing the characters and knowing that these people have completely opposite POVs on everything. And that is what's going to bring the comedy, is their conflicting dynamic.
Yeah, and I saw, I think, and I might butcher this example, but I saw an interview that Quinta Brunson was being interviewed by the Paley Center. And she talked about how Larry Wilmore gave her the example of like, knowing if a character saw like money on the floor, how would that character react to it, right? And then she went through the whole list of like, Barbara would be like, praise God, and Melissa would be like, looking around, like, and so it's like that, and I see that, like, and even I think sometimes in the cold opens and scenes where they're just having like a run of jokes, it's often just the characters reacting in character to the same thing.
Yeah, that's so excellent. I think that's a way to think of character, because character is revealed through your actions, really. So having the same scenario and doing an exercise where how would each character react to the same sort of inciting incident, and then you can really create a character that feels substantive, that feels unique, and make sure that if in a script all your characters are reacting the same way, then you know that you have a problem.
It's a good test.
That's really good. That's really helpful. So in Act 2, we go into the protagonist really dealing with the obstacles of trying to achieve their goal. So in Abbott specifically, what is Janine doing? She really wants the rug. She thinks, I'm going to do this through the system, and I'm going to request the emergency funds. But
and she's gloating the whole time, like thinking like, see, I got them to agree. All I have to do is write up this email, and she's trying to get everybody like, tell me what you want to put on the list. I got it. And so she's like, I guess like they say, like hoisting herself on her own petard, like, and so, like she's going to crash. Like you cannot be successful and be that like, braggadocious in a comedy, like in a pilot, like on a sitcom, like, oh, you think you're going to be successful,
be taken down,
the farther you're going to fall. So it's where she thinks that she's in control. She's gathering the information, and she submits it. And now we really get to see Ava's character, the principal, come to life when she is very self-serving and buys the big sign. She uses they get the money, which is the win. But Ava then uses it. So it's like, even when you get what you want, now you have this principal. Now we know there's an antagonist in the house. The call is coming from inside the school. And it's Ava. And that established her right there.
And like you said, it's really interesting seeing Janine's dynamic of bragging. He thinks she's going to get it, when Melissa and Barbara, who are actually experienced and would know, they're telling her the whole time, like, give it up, girl. You're doing too much. Stop. And she's just determined to prove that she's right. And as you say, what is it? The mighty fall.
Yes. And also something else I noticed, and I don't know that they ended up playing this out much throughout the rest of the first season, but there was a thing which I think was maybe the series goal, or like a series stakes, where the idea that most teachers don't make it past their second year. And this was her second year. So in a way, if you were looking at it as over the course of the season, like, we're going to see if she's going to stay through. I don't know that really stuck, but in this first thing it was. And so that kind of explained Barbara's point of view on her. Like, you're not even going to stick around anyway.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
And all these teachers come in thinking they're going to change everything. And those are the ones that burn out because you're trying to do too much. If you just keep your head down, do your job, you might stick around. And we see that example in like the B story with the teacher that gets fired for
somebody doesn't make it.
Throwing hands on the kids.
And she was provoked. That's the other thing. It's like, not that she was right, but it's like those are the situations that they're dealing with and a valid reason why somebody would quit or leave.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that further illustrates the point. And then we have the B story with the substitute, Gregory Eddy, coming in to fill in after the teacher gets fired for, rightfully so, fighting that student.
Yeah. What was so funny is like, I was conflicted about whether or not, which is fine, right? Like, I was conflicted about whether or not the teacher was wrong.
No, I think she was right.
No. Yeah, exactly. And then, but then they came on strong with like, that's one thing you don't do is hit a kid. And I was just like, well, but so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that was hilarious. So, Janine sort of ends Act 2 at a low point.
Yeah.
Funds are gone. And she thinks that she can go over Ava's head.
Right.
And so she thinks, I'm going to write the superintendent and I'll go over the principal's head. But what she doesn't know is that the superintendent's emails are just forwarded to the principal.
Yes.
So that backfires on her again, trying to work through this system, backfires on her. And all she's done is just pissed Ava off.
Yes.
So then Ava calls this staff meeting to, address basically this email that is making her look bad, which leads us into Act 3, which is the final resolution of the show, where we see if the protagonist fails or if they achieve success. So in Act 3, Ava calls this meeting. She basically just uses it as a roast session to harass Janine, and to sort of the audience surprise, the other teachers stand up for Janine, which they've sort of been roasting her the whole episode as well. Yeah. But when Ava's just piling it on and on, it was nice to see that her friends really believed in her and they said, this is enough. We're going to walk out of this meeting in support of Janine. So that was good to see. Yeah,
because it was like it backfired for Janine, right? The sending of the email. But then Ava's plan backfired too because it inspired the teachers. Like they have like a bond. They know what they're going through. And also Janine displayed in that meeting how much she cares about the kids. So it was like undeniable when she was like, because everybody had to miss lunch. There was a kid there that had to miss lunch and Janine was about to leave, came back and was like, no, actually you should have this,
Yes.
And so it's so clear, like she's not the regular teacher who's gonna, who doesn't care, who thinks they're gonna change the world, but doesn't really care and is gonna burn out and leave. They saw something in her.
Yeah, and I think that's important because you could mistakenly assume that Janine is doing this, for her own ego purposes, the way that she's behaving throughout the episode. But it's not self-serving. It's for the kids. I remember there was a moment where she says the rug, is not just for aesthetics. Like one of the students, he's not able to get enough sleep at home, so he comes and sleeps on that rug during school hours. And so you see that she really cares. It's not just some stupid mission to get a rug. It's for the betterment of the kids.
Yeah, and that moment when she's revealing that to the other characters, they're all, that's when they all discover they're more alike than they are different, because they all care that way. That kid was in Barbara's class last year, so they all have that bond. And then the audience gets to see like, okay, this is what, even though they have all of these different points of view, the thing that bonds them is their love for the kids. And the issue that they're always going to go up against is this underfunded school. Like that's what's so clear. Like every issue they have is related to the underfunded school.
Yeah, I think that is so true. And one of the moments I loved is that Janine really loses and the resolution. She doesn't get what she wants. She wanted the funds to come from the system. It doesn't come that traditional way. But I think one of the wins is that she gains the respect of her fellow colleagues. I think that was sort of the true win, is that moment where all the teachers say, I'll pitch in, I'll help you get the rug. But she's like, you're broke.
Exactly.
You're broke because I'm broke, so I know you're broke. You don't have to. You don't have to do that. So how does she end up getting the rug in the end?
Yeah, there was a line that somebody says, because this actually bothered me about the pilot, because I would initially on the first watches I was like, why wouldn't you just have Melissa go do, from the beginning?
Yeah, that's
She's
true.
so shady. Like, what the heck? Like, that bothered me so much about the pilot. But then I realized that wasn't a thought then. Melissa wasn't on her side.
Yes.
And Barbara said something like, what are you going to do? Like, it was something like,
there was a throwaway line. I think that was good. It set it up that Melissa had some connections.
Yeah.
Because there was a throwaway line earlier in the episode where she's like, "Oh yeah, my hookup down at the Eagles."
So so we know that she has that capability. Yes. But then in that moment, she says something like, "Oh, what are we gonna do? Call somebody?" Blah blah blah. And then she's like, I know a guy. So that like sparked her in that moment to have that idea. But to me, that was like walking the line of almost like too easy.
It didn't bother me because, like you said, Melissa was not trying to help Janine the whole time. So I think just in that last moment when Janine sort of reveals,
she earns it. She
earns that moment. Because I think throughout the pilot, the teachers are also annoyed with Janine and think that she's also probably just doing it for ego purposes. Like, look at me, I'm going to save the school. And Melissa, as an older teacher, has known these types of people that try to do everything and they don't do anything and just leave.
And also, a rug isn't enough. Like, so what would get you a rug? All of these other problems still exist. Like, what's the point?
Yes.
And then it's like the kid is the point.
Yeah, it's not about her, it's about helping that child. And I think it's sort of, as a teacher, if you're able to help one person, I think you've done your job. It's a lot to tackle.
You can't do it all.
Yes. And I think that's sort of the larger theme of Abbott is that there are all these structural issues. There's a lot of bureaucracy in a school. There's a lot going on. If you try to tackle, underfunded public school systems as one person,
huge. I
don't think you're really going to change that. But you can make a difference in the life of one child. And that's sort of what happens on Abbott.
And it's the fact that they have to do it together. I wanted to say something else about Janine being an active protagonist, which is so important because everything that happened to Janine, she had a role in. Like, everything was like the fact that, that what happened with Ava, like Ava finding out, it was because Janine was trying to go over her head. Like, everything was Janine's fault, right? It wasn't, nothing was just happening to her. And that's so important. Like, she's even she even plays a part in her own failure.
Downfall. Yes, that's true.
And that's real. So,
that is true. And even the what you bring up about why didn't Melissa just help her? Maybe she would have if, Janine wasn't being such kind of like annoying about it. Maybe she could have gotten helped earlier. I think that is very important that the protagonist is really driving the plot. Like you said, they're making choices that are pushing the story forward, not just a bunch of things happening to them.
And that's just, I know you bring up like reading pilots from people who are just, learning how to write them. That's the biggest thing is that I see is that the protagonist isn't active enough, that they're just responding to things happening.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. This conversation is going much better than I ever.
Oh, good.
No,
you had low expectations of me.
Not because of you.
No, I'm just kidding.
Because of me. I'm like, oh, no.
No, you know your stuff.
Oh, I love Abbott, and I have, taught a class that was about Abbott, which I'm sure you probably have as well. So
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't?
No, I just have my long list of notes I keep to myself.
Wow. Oh, okay.
I break down pilots for fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's really helpful and interesting to know that as a writer, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Because I agree. Like, the thing that helped me improve my writing the most was reading other people's scripts
absolutely.
and having to do script coverage. I was an intern and had to do coverage. And even when I was reading the bad scripts, those probably helped me more than the good scripts, to be honest, because I had to articulate why something wasn't working. So I'm really, this has been a great conversation. So basically, like we said, the resolution wraps up. Janine doesn't get what she wants in the way that she wanted to, but she still gets a win. And we sort of established this is what's going to be happening on all the episodes of Abbott. Then we go to the tag. In a comedy, a tag is sort of just a last scene, a last chance to get in that final joke. You're not setting up any new plot points or anything. Sometimes you're calling back to an earlier plot point or joke that was in another scene. In the case of the Abbott pilot, we have that Janine, she's sort of feeling inspired, like, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. I don't need to work through the system. I'm going to fix that broken toilet we've been having problems with. She goes to the bathroom, and of course that doesn't work. It explodes in her face. And I think that sort of sets up.
I mean, we have to, it's like resetting the character too. It's like, oh, you think you won? You think you figured it out? Like, no, like you're going in there by yourself to fix this problem that's been, and it's not going to happen. Like she's still not going to be able to do it by herself, right? She's still got a bigger battle than she can handle by herself, which I think is really well illustrated very subtly.
Yes, I think the tag is a great character moment for her. Like you said, in a pilot, you want to have a little bit of growth. And I think she does have growth from being a person that's very a stickler for the rules. I have to do everything through the system. There's protocols and procedures for everything. That's the type of person. And by the end, she learns that, sometimes you have to work around the system to provide for your kids. But, she's still going to be Janine. She's still going to think, I can do it. I can save the day. I can do everything. And it's not going to work out at all.
It's like, she moves a little bit more towards Barbara. Because this idea of like, she believed in the system, which, and Barbara didn't. And we see her move closer to Barbara. And then we see Barbara move closer to her. So the two opposing viewpoints are coming together, which is very cool. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tackling Abbott. I think we did a great job breaking it down. So now that school's out on Abbott, would you stick around and I can ask you a few more questions about your writing career?
Of course, yeah.
Stand by.
So I wanted to ask you, you're someone who's worked in a variety of different formats, reality shows, talk shows, sketch show, just traditional comedy. I think that's kind of rare, to be honest. So I wanted to ask, how is a writing process different for all of these formats?
Yeah, it's totally different completely different. So for instance, so I worked on Making It, which is like a competition reality show for like craft. And the reason, and I always want people to know this, that there are other jobs in comedy, like anytime there's a comedian as a host, they want comedy writers to write their copy. And I don't think people are aware of those jobs. And so that's how I ended up writing competition reality. Like Amy Poehler was a host and Nick Offerman. So you want comedy people writing their jokes.
Yeah.
Everything they say is scripted, even though it's, reality for the hosts. What was my point? Oh, so and there's much more production involved. Like I was very much with the other writers. It was only it was the head writer, me, and then an assistant. That was it.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, but we were very much involved with production because things are happening live. Like people are they're being judged. People are making crafts. So we're watching to be able to feed the judges something to talk about.
Oh, so you have to just make up something.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it's a lot of it is improv, where actually the head writer would be off camera, like when they're doing the interstitials where the host is just talking about, what just went down. They're improving, like the head writer is off, like giving things for like Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman to say, like to improv on, and we're the writers are feeding those things in. Like we'll be on walkie-talkie saying, oh, what about like so and so just dropped their shoe and it was so funny, it was filled with nail, like whatever, right? And it's like, what about this? And so I loved that aspect of it. I got to produce like contestants when they were leaving. There was like a special thing that they did, and I got to be the one who produced those contestants, which was very cool. So I got a lot of production experience in that space. And then also working on 12 Dates of Christmas, which was another.
I love that show.
That was
That show is so underrated.
It
I
is.
tell everyone you need to watch
Yes,
that show.
exactly. And so there was a comedian host again,
Yes,
Natasha Rothwell, right?
yes.
And so but it was all done in post for me.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was getting all these cuts of what was happening and making up like the observations that she was going to say.
Oh, yes.
And so that was my first time really working in post. And that was difficult because they would change. They're forming the stories.
So
they're forming the storylines based on the edit.
Yeah.
So then they're changing. Yeah. So yeah, that was very cool to get to see. And then, I worked in multicam, which was very cool because that was like putting up a play every day, like when I worked on the Upshaws.
So they filmed it live.
Yeah, they film it live, and I worked there when it was during the pandemic, so I didn't get to go down to the set and watch it, but we were watching it being filmed.
Monitor,
yeah, and just that whole process of like every week, like putting up another show where you see it go from writer's draft to table draft to first rehearsal, second rehearsal. Then it's getting better every time. Very exciting. Like that was probably my best experience of understanding the process of how, TV writing works. And then I most recently, and then I worked for the sketch show. And to me, I think that's the hardest I've ever written, the most I've ever written, because we're writing like,
so many
sketches. Yeah, it's like not skits.
Oh, sketch. Don't want to anger the sketch police. Forgive me.
Of which I am. I don't know where that, but I mean it.
Yes, okay.
I hate to do that, but I'm serious. And so we have so many up in there. You're writing 2 more, but then you have 2 more that are revisions.
Yeah, that
so
is a lot.
So, and then we're revising them all to get it down to just like 30 or so sketches that are gonna air.
That's a 30.
Yeah,
That's
but it's
lot.
it feels like when you're, and this is not necessarily true, but it feels in like a writer's room for a sitcom, it's like most of the time we're sitting around breaking story, we're talking
Yes.
about story. And then you'll go off and you'll have your one script and your outline that you'll write. And that's all the writing that you'll actually do.
Pretty much.
So to be writing every day.
Oh, that actually is pretty good. Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah,
those are the biggest differences. I think but to me, I just think storytelling is more satisfying in a longer form, but I'll work anywhere that will hire me. So I will.
You get that bag. Gotta keep a bag.
Yes. I'm very happy to be versatile. Like
That's
I never
good.
saw it as I know a lot of people feel like I'm going to get trapped.
Yeah, that's why I asked. I feel like it's very rare to be moving around in so many different spaces.
Because people don't even try.
That
because
is
they're
true.
scared to get trapped. And I was like, I just need a job. And
true.
those connections, I was working with comedians all the time. And all of that helps.
That's good. Thank you
Yeah.
for that answer. I learned a lot. I didn't know.
I know it was a long answer, but
No, I think it was very
Okay,
informative.
good.
I didn't know that stuff. So when you were a professor, you were teaching and writing, a lot of times I hear people who've been to film school say, I learned all this great stuff, but it's theory. It's very different than being in a writer's room. So when you're a professor, how did you prepare, your students to actually work as a writer, not just theoretical stuff?
Yeah. So actually, I wasn't teaching at a film school. I started a creative writing major at a predominantly Black college, Bloomfield College in New Jersey. And it was a small liberal arts college. So it was like me I was like the only at one point I was the only full-time professor of creative writing, and the rest were adjuncts.
Oh, wow.
So I started off, my specialty was poetry.
Oh, wow.
But I was learning to be a screenwriter and TV writer. So as I was learning, I was designing classes. You know how they say like, all you have to do to teach is stay one chapter ahead of the student. I'm like, this is how you do a cold open. Let me learn it. This is how you do a cold open. Like, I was using an opportunity. I was like, we'll both learn. I'll get the opportunity to teach it. And they'll get the opportunity to do it. And the way you talked about like, we're doing script coverage and learning, like I've read countless amount of scripts, and I was teaching like screenplays too. And like, so reading and being able to like give feedback and help people revise and all of that like fed into my process. Okay, so that's me and how I benefited. And so the way that I was looking at it for my students, because I had gone and I had an MFA in creative writing, right? And I knew like that there's no jobs at the end of that. And a lot of times people tell you there's no jobs at the end of like a creative writing degree, but that's up to you. You know what I mean? Like your skills are transferable. You have to have the ability to communicate the skills that you're gaining, and you can work almost any job that you can convince people that you can work. But I think what I told my students the most is focus on vulnerability and doing the work that's most like authentic to you, and that's what will connect. Like that's the first step, is just doing good work. A lot of my students, I don't know, because it was a lower socioeconomic background that they came from. And so they didn't really aspire, even though we were like, you know, a train ride away from like New York, there wasn't many of them that were aspiring to be. And that's why like screenwriters and that's why it was so important to me to expose them to that opportunity. But yeah, that wasn't really, it was just giving them another mode of
expression.
Of expression, yeah.
No, but I think what you were talking about, exposing people, that's something like I didn't know being a screenwriter was a job.
Yes,
like,
exactly. Nobody, it's all,
it's like
a mystery.
I grew up in LA, but I'm very like regular LA.
Regular LA.
Like I don't know famous people.
Right.
I watch TV, but like you don't connect that like, oh, someone's writing this. I didn't realize that till I went to college. Yeah. And I took a screenwriting elective, and I was like, oh, I can do this. Because I had always done creative writing. I went to an arts high school for creative writing. Nice. But I thought being a writer means that you write books, and that's like, I don't want to write books. Like I knew that, and I just like, well, if I don't want to write books, I guess I can't be a writer. That's what I thought. And then when I went to college and learned, oh, you can do this, I was like, oh, I'll do that.
Exactly.
But like you said, you just need exposure to different opportunities. And
I always said I felt like I was teaching vulnerability. Like that's what I was teaching. Like, sorry, I touched the mic. I was teaching vulnerability and giving students a way in to themselves for introspection, because that's the type of work that I was having them do. So I think to me, in that case, the value was different than them being in the industry at all. It was more like using storytelling as a tool for self-development.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you, Jonterri.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge of Abbott. Like I said, this conversation was amazing. I learned so much from you about your personal life, about your teaching, and I'm glad that I could see you. I know we met on the strike, so it's glad to see us, rested, sitting down, not marching around.
Not miserable in the sun.
In the heat, just sweating outside in Culver City. So it's nice to see you.
Yes, you too. Thank you. This was great.
Thank you. Thanks again to our guest, Jonterri Gadson, and of course to Quinta Brunson and all the incredible writers at Abbott Elementary for crafting such an excellent show. Last but not least, thanks to you for tuning into the podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. You can watch the video on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Stay up to date with what's going on at InTheCutLA on Instagram or visit our website, inthecutla.org. Till next time, stay in the cut.